All right, so this is going to be the Fact Check This Podcast, episode 11, and today I am joined by Jim McGill, and I'm going to let Jim talk about his podcast a little bit, and then we're going to kind of have some back and forth on libertarianism, the Peddling Fiction Podcast, and just whatever else we happen to come up with this evening. So Jim, take it away.
Right on. Well, Justin, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me on. I'm very honored to be your first guest, if I am your first guest.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, I also am trying my hand at podcast. I have a podcast with a couple of buddies of mine. It's called Ignore the Rant. And it's basically just a bunch of ignorant rants by a bunch of guys who are news and political, not necessarily a libertarian podcast. I'm the only libertarian on the podcast. We have me and my buddy Arona, who is a recovering Bernie bro, and another guy, my neighbor Doug, who's an old 80s metalhead. And he's got a recording studio in his basement. And we figured, hey, while you're not making music, let's make a podcast. We already talk about news and politics and, current events and pop culture. Let's just hit record and put it out there and see if anybody really gives a shit about it. And even if they don't, it's still some fun for us, and we'd be doing it anyway. So that's my that's all I got as far as what I'm doing. But how I found you was through a mutual podcast interest in peddling fiction. I'm not sure if you want to go down any of that, but I saw your bat signal in the private Facebook group, and I said, screw it, let's see what happens. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah, you are definitely my first interview, and I've listened to the last couple episodes of Ignore the Rant, and I think it's really good. Y'all are very well produced, much better produced than what I am with this show, and you definitely have some good conversations. I like the banner of not having all libertarians on, because a lot of the podcasts that I do listen to tend to be all libertarians talking to each other about libertarian things from a libertarian mindset. So to hear some different opinions mixed in there is really good, and y'all do have a good rapport, so it's pretty good stuff. I like it a lot.
Well, I appreciate that. If there's one thing that I've learned already, it's that it's actually really challenging to try to have political conversations with those that do not share your ideology, and even if they are your best friends. And I think one of our main goals is to be able to have that conversation where we know we're not going to agree. We know that we're going to think that the other person's wrong or dumb for thinking this or crazy for saying that, and seeing how that conversation can still happen where we all leave at the end of the episode and we're all still friends and nobody's unfriending the other or telling one guy to move out, get away from me, and nobody's kicking each other out of each other's lives, because it just doesn't need to be that way. So even if it sounds like we fall off the rails, that's unintended but expected. But at the end, we still, we hug and make up at the end of, every episode so far.
That's I don't think, from what I've heard, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. It seems like y'all do have a very good respect for each other and each other's opinions, and you definitely make it entertaining. All right. So what brought you to peddling fiction? You were talking about that a little bit before we got started, and so I was going to let you, because like I said, with these crossover episodes, I really kind of want to get with the peddling fiction crowd and kind of get some ideas on what we've got going on in there, and see kind of where you came from and what brought you both to libertarianism and also to peddling fiction.
Sure. So I will start first with, I guess, me finding libertarianism. Like most people, when I was younger, all the way up through college. I'm 38, so I was in college until the mid. So I was leaving college when Ron Paul came onto the scene, and the 2008 revolution is what just opened my eyes. I'd never heard anybody talk like that on a presidential, debate stage, and it just made sense immediately. And so that was the spark for me. Like most people I at least meet that's my age, that was the spark for me, where I said, I need to find out more about this guy, find out why he's and I think around 2012, somewhere around there, podcasting became basically what it is now. And I wanted to seek out more conversations like that. And I think through the pipeline of Joe Rogan to he had Dave Smith on, I started listening to Dave Smith, and basically it was like, this guy's saying everything better than I would. And I guess it was about a year ago, or my time's all messed up. 2020 days or weeks, weeks or months, and who knows what. But Dave Smith on Part of the Problem was running an ad for peddling fiction, and I said, well, he hasn't let me down yet. I imagine this will be just as good. And so I immediately started listening, haven't stopped. And Johnny Profita is like, he says everything. He's blunt. He just gets right to it. And there's so many times where if a friend of mine has a question about something, or they have a stance on something, and I'm like, I have a thought, but let me let you listen to this because this guy says it way better. And if you get mad, it's at him and not at me. So here, I'll let Johnny do the talking for me. And then I guess halfway through the summer, maybe around June, Johnny said, hey, by the way, we do have a private Facebook page. Come on in. And I'm part of a handful of other private Facebook pages for like Good Morning Liberty, not Death to Tyrants, Lions of Liberty, Tom Woods, Part of the Problem before it got zucked. And so I was like, bring it, let's add it on. And so I got in there, and it was a slow go. And I really enjoyed your Monday meme stream. And I think that's kind of where I've had the most fun. So yeah, I don't know if that's the longest answer to your short question, but that's kind of how I got to where we are now.
Well, it seems like a lot of people did find him through Dave Smith and Part of the Problem. I actually had, that's how I found peddling fiction as well. I had come around to Dave. I had no idea who Dave Smith was. I was actually listening to a Joe Rogan episode. And then, so I listened to the Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink and Tulsi Gabbard interview, because I really wanted to hear what she had to say. And because I was kind of paying attention to her during the Democratic primaries, because she seemed like the only candidate that the Democrats had that I would actually have any interest in voting for. And so I listened to that interview, and then I listened to a few more Rogan episodes, and one of them he had Michael Malice on. And so then I went and listened to Malice's show, and then Malice and Dave Smith did their crossover episodes, and so that got me listening to Part of the Problem. And so now I'm like neck deep in libertarian podcast.
Keeps on going.
I know, because
it's almost podcast inception.
I know, and so over the summer, at one point, Johnny, on one of his episodes, he had said that he had a private Facebook group and a YouTube channel, and that he didn't really do anything with them, and he really needed somebody to run his social media type stuff for him. And a week or so later, I sent him a message on Twitter, and I said, have you ever found anybody to run your social media for you? And he said, no. Would you want to do it? It's like, okay. So that was how I kind of fell into the private Facebook group, and then I do the little YouTube clips and stuff like that. And so trying to get some engagement going with I do feel like the meme stream for sure has gotten some good engagement going on the Facebook group, and other people post some pretty good stuff. It's been really cool to see that kind of grow here over the last few months.
Absolutely. And I've been less and less active on Facebook, especially recently, because if you post anything of really any quality, your chances of ruining someone else's page only goes up. So I've seen a lot of people move over to like MeWe, Parler, or all you got Minds, Gab, all this other stuff popping up now. So I want to be more active, but I really don't want to destroy the page either. So I'm kind of walking it as closely as I can without having to really run for the hills. But anyway,
I think we would wear it as a badge of honor if you totally destroyed the page. That would be
all right. Well, hopefully I don't know if Johnny listens to these, but hopefully I can get his blessing and he'd be like, hey, let's see who can nuke it the fastest.
Heck yeah. And if you do happen to totally destroy it, I've got a MeWe page set up for it already, so we've got a backup if we need to run for the hills.
Awesome. Well, I'll join you over there as well. But yeah, I didn't know. I was always curious because I did hear him give you a mention on one of the episodes, and you know, only having an audio relationship with the podcast, I didn't know if y'all were like childhood friends, if you were down in Mexico with him. When when you set this up, I was like, man, Mexico internet must be awesome. Um, so yeah, I had no idea what the background or what the backstory was on that.
Nope, I'm just a random dude who kind of fell into it.
Right on, right on. Well, I can tell by your accent, you sound like you're from a certain region of the United States that I live in. Are you from the South?
Yeah, so I'm from the Kentucky-Tennessee state line originally, and then I lived in Arkansas and Mississippi for a while, and then currently I'm in Indiana. So
Okay,
I was raised Southern, and
there
then
you go.
you got your
Yeah,
big G on your G and your Braves logo. So I can assume you're from Georgia.
yep. Born and raised in Georgia, still live in the Atlanta metro area. Went to college down at a university in southern Georgia, Statesboro, Georgia Southern. Had a lot of fun down there. You got family all over the state. This is this is home for me, and I can pick up a familiar accent with the best of them.
So in the part of Georgia around Atlanta where you live, did y'all get to experience any of the violence or craziness that was going on over the summer?
So yeah, a little bit we did. I'm in. Well, I'll say it doesn't matter to me. I'm in Gwinnett County. It's one of the metro counties just northeast of downtown. It's at the 2 o'clock, on the clock of Atlanta. Uh, because we did, as soon as the Rayshard Brooks incident happened, much like other places across the country, unrest erupted immediately. And within the week following that, we had some local outbursts here in the county to the point where they even had individuals going and trying to firebomb cop cars at police officers' houses in residential areas of which I do reside. So wasn't very awesome. Okay, so yeah, shortly after the Rayshard Brooks incident here in Atlanta, there was unrest almost immediately, and it lasted for days. More so at the scene of the incident, but I'm in a county that butts up to Fulton County where the incident happened. So it obviously spilled over into other neighboring counties, and they had some protests here, which were not that bad. And then, like a week after, there were groups of people that were going to police officers' homes here in this county, trying to firebomb cop cars at their residences. And I live in the residences that those police live, some of them. So it got a little closer to home than I think I was expecting. And so yeah, things were a little tense there for a few days. It did calm down. Um, but more so, the field that I work in requires me to go visit all types of properties in the metro, actually all over the southeast. And for probably actually still to this day, I avoid the area of the Wendy's where it happened because I mean they've straight up come out and said, if you're the wrong color at the wrong intersection, we're gonna make it known that you shouldn't be here. And most all my family's law enforcement, from my dad being a local law enforcement officer to my stepdad being a retired special agent, and so I have a little different perspective than I think most. I can understand the unrest, the upsetness, and I can also understand the police side. And I'm also a libertarian, so I'm very torn a lot of times when these kind of things happen. The one thing that I will trust is if I'm talking to family that's still in law enforcement and they say, Jim, do not go near that area. This isn't. They're not playing around, and this isn't something that you want to try to go take a shot for the gram and say, look at me. No, they meant business, and it was pretty sketchy for a little while. But Atlanta, comparatively speaking, has been fairly calm, given 2020 and all the craziness around it. So I don't know what that means. In a normal year, this would be really bad for Atlanta, but comparatively speaking to the rest of the country, luckily it hasn't lingered as long as, other areas.
Well, I saw they burned down the CNN building or overran it or whatever, and that was pretty exciting. But
Yeah, I didn't
yeah,
mind that at all. I kind of wish that they would have maybe, I won't get into that, but yeah, I wasn't bothered. Well, that didn't bother me a bit.
I'd say. But beyond that, the Atlanta coverage kind of, at least on a more national level, I guess, it really didn't get covered a whole lot after that first couple weeks. Like after you saw the pictures of the CNN building, beyond that, there wasn't really a lot, at least around where I'm from, there wasn't really a lot of talk about Atlanta. It mostly focused on Chicago and then like LA, New York, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the one thing that Atlanta did differently is the mayor came out the night of and spoke out against it. She ended up backtracking, which I think really confused a lot of people. And obviously, it's a Democrat mayor. I can't vote for her. But after the first night that she came out with Killer Mike and Ti, I think I know Killer Mike was there. I think Ti might have been. And they had that press conference, and she said what she said, which was basically like, "Hey, get your asses back home. This is Atlanta. We don't do that here." And I was like, "Hell yeah! If I could vote for you, I would." And then a week later, she came out and said that all of this civil unrest and all the violence is totally justified, and we totally understand. And then we had the Atlanta police chief, resign. We had cops get fired. The DA, charged the officers involved way higher than it got so squirrely because you had six police officers get fired for using a taser the week before Rayshard Brooks. And then when Rayshard Brooks attempted to use the taser on the officers, the definition of what level of danger that weapon possesses totally changed. And so everybody that twisted everything a little further into unrest than I think it should have, because you got two different messages from the same people within a week's time. And so you were kind of telling people, don't do this. And then a week later, you were saying, totally fine. And it just made for a really awkward time in Atlanta, which traditionally Atlanta does not do riots, unrest, property damage. We usually get along pretty well. When I was growing up in the 80s, that the moniker for Atlanta was the city too busy to hate. And it's like, we've already been through all this before. We've already kind of squashed this racial stuff. Like, this isn't really new, and we've all learned how to live together peaceably. So this shouldn't be anything that rocks us to our core. But yeah, got a little weird. Hope it kind of never happens again, but who knows?
Well, fortunately, I'm in Evansville, Indiana is like the big town around here, and it's a decent size. We've got a college and everything, but comparatively speaking, it's a pretty small town for the most part. So there were some protests and stuff that went on, and my wife actually joined some friends of ours from church, and they went down and participated in the protests, and everything was very peaceful and calm and everything. And they had different people that spoke, and it was all really, really good stuff. And then later that evening, I think like 2 or 3 idiots decided to try to run up on some cops around the courthouse and ended up getting body slammed and taken to jail. And that was pretty much the end of it. So they shut that down pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, if you're protesting police violence or abuse of power, all you got to do is give them a reason. If you already think that they're going to abuse you, kind of, maybe not give them that reason. If know that that's kind of what you think that they're there for, I would probably just stick to protesting and not getting body slammed.
Right, not a great approach when you already think they're here to kill you no matter what. Don't give them any more excuse than they already have.
Yeah, definitely. And if there's anything that we've learned in 2020, it's that shit will go down, and it doesn't really take that much nowadays, which I think is a dangerous precedent. And I don't know if it's going to remain isolated to just this year, because I think we've become a little conditioned to it. I know, back in May, and well, let me backtrack. I don't know if you remember, but in Georgia, you had the Ahmaud Arbery shooting that happened, I think, back in February.
Yeah, it was well, it might have been, I think it might have actually happened in like January, and then it didn't start getting any media attention until like March or something, because the guys who did it were had some connections within the police force there in that area, and so it had kind of gotten ignored, and then it ended up coming back around, and it got brought up, and so it it had happened quite a bit before when it got attention, and then when it got attention, within a month was when the George Floyd, and then everything. So it kind of was the first domino in that chain. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So my take on it is it's probably a little different take. And, I like to have fun, try to connect dots, whether they're there or not go full tinfoil hat or Alex Jones, but it just seemed odd to me that the Ahmaud Arbery case happened months earlier. COVID comes a couple months after that. Lockdowns happen. Georgia was one of the first states to reopen or at least restrict lockdown measurements. And as soon as that news came out, poof, all of a sudden the video is there. And it was like, it's almost like this was timed. Not saying it is, not saying it isn't, just connecting dots, whether they're there or not. And then there wasn't a lot of unrest. I think people weren't, their emotions weren't elevated that much at that point. They were ready to sit back and say, well, we have our take. I have my opinion. I think NFAC members went down there to, make a presence known, but nothing really happened out of that. Now, and then everybody kind of just went back to let's adjust to COVID. And then, in May, when a lot of states were talking about reopening, boom, now the video of George Floyd happens, and now it's just unrest time. And to me, if there's one thing about 2020, COVID, civil unrest, campaigns, election, everything, there's so many anomalies and there's so many coincidences that once you stop back and look at the year as a whole, you start to go, I don't know if I really buy that all these things just happened.
Yeah, that they all just so happen to fall in line at these exact right times. There are, if you really wanted to go full tinfoil hat, there are some conspiracies out there that George Floyd was a paid actor. He's not actually dead. That the whole thing was staged, and they've got him hidden away somewhere. And in a few years, when everybody forgets all about him, then he'll get to come back out and resume a normal life.
Yeah, he's hanging out with Tupac and Tom Petty, and they're just waiting for their moment to come back and have their moment in the sun, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. To me, I just looked at it more as everything that happened post impeachment just all happened to work in one direction. And it's like the most cataclysmic year that I can ever remember. We were breaking records on the number of storms, hurricanes. We're breaking the streak of protests in some of these cities. Like when all this popped off in May, my neighbor and I, we immediately found a website called woke.net, where it was the TV guide of every live streamer that was at every protest. And I was like, oh, let me go get the popcorn. I'm going to watch all this. And so for over 100 nights, I gave up after like day 17. I was like, okay, I get it. They get mad, they break stuff. But my neighbor, he stuck with it for like 100 days. He was just, man, Portland's going off. You got to check it out. And I was just like, I've never seen anything like this. Like, third president ever to get impeached. That's enough for a year. I mean, that would be enough to round out any normal year. And then, COVID, it's like, well, that's like once in a century. So I think we've covered a few years there. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, multiple cities popping off and protest. Okay, this seems to be stacking really heavy over to one side now. What the fuck is going on? And then you get to the election, obviously, with the DNC pushing everything behind Biden, holding out Bernie, taking him and pushing him to the back again. It's funny, the party that's asking for unity and to trust the election has 2 consecutive elections of, well, suppressing election results as far as what the people wanted. And I think Bernie Bros should be pretty red pilled at this point. And then, I mean, I don't even know where to start. I'm all over the place because 2020 is the most insane shit I've ever seen.
Well, I was going to ask you, since you're bringing it up, the election, what do you think about all of the kind of conspiracy theories that are flying around with that as far as voter fraud? And is it going to make a difference? Like, where are you with all of that? I was listening to your the episode that y'all released of Ignore the Rant on Monday, and you were talking about y'all were talking about some of that and having some disagreement on it. And so I wanted to get your unfiltered opinion on that.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that because I came in, we record on Fridays and then we were released on Mondays. And I like to have show prep. I like to have notes written out, headlines, articles, and so does Arona, another co-host with us. So he and we were ready to rock, and we get in there. But Doug is a news junkie. He watches news. He's watching news right now. I guarantee it. I'll just bet $100 he's watching news right now. And so he gets so burnt out by the end of the week that the last thing he wants to do is talk about news. And I'm like, well, we're a current events and political podcast. This might prove to be problematic. So when I came in and I was like, I've got 15 anomalies, affidavits, Dominion, a water pipe burst with no proof in Atlanta. Where do you want to start? Let's go through all of them. And he was like, none of it matters. And I was like, son of a bitch. It's like, how are you going to, and I talked to him after the show and I was like, Doug, if you bought a movie ticket and the person handing you the ticket says, oh yeah, Batman gets the girl at the end, are you still going to go watch the movie? And he was like, oh yeah, I forgot. I'm like, yeah, we got to put on a show too. So I'm glad you asked. There's quite a few I want to go through. I'll start with this. I do think Joe Biden will be president come January 20th.
I agree. I don't think there's anything they're going to do that's going to stop that.
No. And I think that there's just too much to go through to overturn it. I think that it was a concerted effort to overwhelm the system. I do believe that the Democrats, I mean, it was obvious. They went full court press. Get mail-in ballots, mail them in, mail twice, show up, mail it in, go to another state. You know, it was just like mail, you know, vote, 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 get out the vote. Every single get out the vote commercial of all time has always been Democrat leaning. And I've never seen it pushed as hard as I did this year. And it worked because there's fraud in every election. And I don't think anybody really seriously questions that anymore. So it stands to reason that if there's fraud in every election and you have an election that has the highest number of votes of all time, the amount of fraud is going to increase. It's just, you know, I'm not a mathematist, but that seems pretty reasonable. So do I think it was
law of statistics?
Exactly. Do I think it was ripe with fraud? Absolutely. Do I think it was intentional? And definitely. Absolutely. Without a question in my mind. Do I think that there's enough evidence that they can prove it that will change the outcome? No, I don't. But again, the election was like a microcosm of the year that has been 2020, when you just have these things that are just stacking up, and it's like, how many coincidences are we supposed to accept before we start calling bullshit on the whole thing, on the whole system? You know, who in their right mind still trusts it? You know, you had multiple states simultaneously stop their voting count in multiple states.
And they almost all did it at like the same time. Like it was roughly the same time that they all, and they're on different time zones, and they all just like, all right, we're going to stop for now. It's like,
yeah, it seems odd to me that they can be that coordinated to all stop voting at the same time, yet 2 weeks later, they're still finding votes.
Right.
It's like, how coordinated are you if you can't? Again, is that another coincidence that you all decided to stop counting, which I've never heard of before, especially in multiple states, but you're that organized to stop counting, but you're not organized enough to find a jump drive that just happens to have 1,200 votes for Trump in a local county right down the road here. It's like, I don't know. Seems like there's intent. Also, the big thing, the big reason why they claimed that they stopped counting in Atlanta was that there was a water pipe that had burst in State Farm Arena where they were counting some of the votes. To this day, I haven't seen it, and I've looked, and I go into the recesses of internet to try to see things that aren't on the mainstream, and not one person has been able to produce a photograph of a water pipe burst, even a wet floor sign, a copy of a work order, or an invoice for the parts needed to replace it. In fact, the only thing I have seen are copies of text messages where they say it was a leaking pipe. It was blown way out of proportion. We just wanted to be cautious. But they use that as an excuse to tell the Republican poll watchers, we're going to stop counting for the rest of the night. They leave. They keep counting for another 2 hours.
Well, and in this day and age where everybody is literally connected to everything all the time, like anytime something comes up and it's like, oh, there wasn't any video or there wasn't anything with that, anytime something like that comes up, it makes me super suspicious because, I mean, random kids will video all kinds of dumb stuff in a moment's notice. Like everybody's got their phone just queued up, ready to take pictures and film something. So if it completely went undocumented, that feels like a coordinated effort to do something shady.
Oh, 100%. And it's not only because it's a hypothesis, it's because anytime anything has ever happened in or around State Farm Arena ever, there's at least a security camera on it. There's at least security camera of guys in yellow vests walking to go make a repair. There's always evidence. If it actually happened the way you're claiming it happened in a metropolis, in a downtown urban center, there's evidence of it. That's just the way it is. Even if it happened out in the middle of a cow pasture, you still have to get a work order, some level of paperwork saying that X happened, therefore we needed Y so that we can make the repair of Z. And I haven't seen any of that. So that leads me to believe that this was, and it's not just because I think that the voting system is so flawed. I think it goes back beyond that. I think it goes back over the past 4 years where the establishment hates Donald Trump so much because he was not establishment. He was not part of the military industrial complex. He was not already compromised, and they could not control him. And Hillary was supposed to win. Everybody knows that. I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I voted for Johnson Weld because I figured, what difference does it make? All of this is rigged already. Hillary's going to for sure get in. The only thing that actually gave me hope in the American election system was that Trump won, because that wasn't supposed to happen. And so it got me into going, oh, well, maybe voting actually does work. I mean, shit, if this guy who clearly was never supposed to be anywhere near the White House made it, maybe they actually are counting these things. So,
yeah,
who knows?
Talking about 16, the Republicans did everything they could to keep him from getting the nomination to begin with, and he just totally steamrolled everything they put up in his way. And he was definitely the dark horse in that whole thing. And to come out like that, I think that threw such a monkey wrench in the left's plan for how they were going to move forward, that Trump derangement syndrome is a very, very real thing. And it's kind of, as we go forward, looking like more of a scary thing, just what they're willing to do to go out of their way to get rid of somebody that they didn't want to be in there. You know, it's a scary precedent that they've set, and the fact that the media has gotten so behind it, I think that alone has red pilled a lot of people.
I hope so, because just leading up to this election, if you were, well, hell, I talked with my buddies on my podcast about it. Leading up to it, is like, who do you think is going to win? I'm like, Trump by a landslide. You know, and this was pre-COVID, pre-2020. It was, I can't believe they're going to wheel Joe Biden up there. Everybody can see through this. They're conceding this election by putting him out there, no matter who he has as VP.
Oh yeah, I said it was a total tank job by the Democratic Party. Like they wanted to lose deliberately so that they could spend the next 4 years ramping up the outrage so much that they could just completely destroy everything in 2024. I thought they were deliberately throwing this election when they chose Biden.
Yeah, and to me, it seems so obvious it wasn't even questionable. And so at the beginning of the year, I had Trump in a landslide, wasn't even going to be close. And then even through the summer, and with Biden hiding in his basement and having gaffe galore, uh, it was so clear to me. I was like, oh, this is not even going to be. I don't even need to be up on election night. And because if you just look at support, like energy in the room, Trump had it by orders of magnitude over Biden. I mean, hell, Biden was having rallies where the news media had to come on and say, oh, don't forget, Biden's going to be in town. And it showed a parking lot behind him, no cars. I remember one out in Arizona where they were literally like, we've seen more people, at a Chick-fil-A than we have even trying to, you wouldn't even know that there was a presidential candidate in town. And so I was like, there's no momentum, there's no energy. If you're going to judge anything on energy level, it's Trump and spades. And not only that, I think the real story, at least as far as this election, isn't all the fraud and all of the backroom counting and the anomalies, which are all fun to talk about. Don't get me wrong, I'm not shitting on those. But the true story is you had traditional GOP members, traditional Republicans, neocons on both sides, the establishment, the deep state intelligence community, everybody versus Trump. It wasn't Republican versus Democrat. It was Trump versus establishment. And the establishment, or some people call it the cathedral, is everything from Hollywood, mainstream media, the corporate press, big tech, just keep going down the list, and then Trump versus all that. So to me, the true story is that they had to pull out every stop imaginable and have the highest voter turnout ever to beat him. The fact that it was even this close shows you that Trump, I think, had the more organic support behind him, because it wasn't people voting for a guy with an R by his name. I personally feel that a lot of people were tired of the establishment, tired of the status quo, wanted to give that big finger to media and tech and the approved narrative. And Trump was that. And he was totally brazen about it. He was the only president in my lifetime to ever bring up the military-industrial complex multiple times in public. I mean,
that was a refreshing look at the president, at least from that perspective, because especially with Clinton, the first Bush, Clinton, the second Bush, Obama, literally for my entire lifetime, all the presidents have done is make sure that we either went to or stayed in war in the Middle East for seemingly no reason. Like even with George W., when after 9/11, like at first you could kind of justify it, but then as it just kept going and they kept adding more stuff, and they went to Iraq for that bullshit, like it wasn't ever, even for the minimal amount that it might have been justified right after 9/11, they threw all credibility out the window almost immediately. Like there was, and then Obama, for as much as the Democrats are supposed to be the anti-war party, he was even worse than any of his predecessors. So, to actually have a president in office saying, we need to be getting troops out and actually bringing up and in combating the military-industrial complex in the mainstream media, that was very refreshing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like what Dave Smith brought up on Rogan, I think last week, when he was making his case for, the pros and cons with Trump, is if you remember in the South Carolina primary and the debate leading up to that, they were in South Carolina. Trump looks over at Jeb and says, your brother lied us into a war. It was stupid. It was unnecessary. We didn't need the state that has Paris Island where they train Marines. He's saying this war's stupid and your brother's responsible. And it's the most establishment Republican family ever, and Trump wins. And I was like, holy shit, I think this democracy thing might actually work out. Um, and and don't get me wrong, is Trump libertarian? Not by a freaking long shot. But I think that and I've said this numerous times to people and friends and family and on my podcast, you know, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I will defend him against the reaction against him, because I think the reaction to Trump is so much worse than Trump himself. Now, what the what the complaints against Trump are, to me, don't come close to anything that's actually valid to get him on. First one being, dude, your ATF and your two-way stance and the stuff that you've passed. What the I don't know how if I can cuss on here, but like,
Have at it.
what the fuck, man? You now have your Boston ATF office trying to go after SBA 3 braces, and now you're reclassifying ARs based on short barrel rifles. But no, if you got this brace now, it's like, get the that drives me up the fucking wall with Trump, and no one's talking about it because Democrats love it, and Republicans don't want to say anything bad about Trump because they are totally pussified now because they don't want to come.
The problem that the Republicans have gotten themselves into, especially the ones who are the hardcore Trump supporters, is they have spent so much time fighting against the left for absolutely nothing that they accuse or that they say is bad about Trump all the time. That when Trump does do something bad, I don't think they feel like they can say anything about it because they have spent so much time fighting so hard. And so then you're left with the only ones who are actually saying anything about any of it are the libertarians, and we're such a small voice in the middle.
Yeah. So for the past 3.5 years, to all my friends that hate Trump, I sound like I'm a MAGA flag waving, just paint me up orange and let's get out there and rally, boys. We got to get this boy elected.
And that's something that I've dealt with too on my Facebook page. Like, I don't know how many times over the last 4 years I've said I did not vote for Trump and I absolutely do not support Trump, but and it's like
yeah, it's like the crap that you want to get him on. Oh, he's misogynist, he's racist, he's xenophobic, he's all these other catchwords that come out of the far left, which libertarians don't give two shits about. So it's like that just misses us. It's like, I want to talk about, other things, and I want to praise him for things that you're shitting on him on. Not expanding the wars, not ending them. That's what I want to bust him on. Waiting until you lose an election before you make the call to bring troops home. Like, what the fuck, dude? But at the same time, you have guys within your own ranks that are lying to the president about what's happening over there so that he doesn't have the full support to make that call. So it's like, don't the system is so bad that you're making me, a libertarian, defend Trump. That should say everything that needs to be said, because I would rather be railing against Trump about the shit that we care about and that everyone should care about. And the way that
the legitimate bad stuff that he's doing, instead of all the dumb bad stuff that he's doing that is just hurts people's feelings.
Yeah. And I think Dave Smith had a tweet earlier in the year, and it was, this was pre-COVID. This was right after the impeachment. And he said something to the effect of, if Trump does win re-election, he will have overcome the intelligence community, mainstream media, big tech, Hollywood, and impeachment, and just kept going on. He was like, that's the most punk rock shit ever. And I was like, you know what? I'm almost now going to support the guy, because he's the only reasonable person who could actually stick it to the system. Because let's be honest, nobody that the LP was going to roll out there was going to do anything with when there's a personality like Trump on the stage. And so that's disheartening, but we're libertarians. We're used to losing. I wanted to see Trump win, to be honest, because I think that the policies of the left are far, far worse than Trump's ineptitude on the right.
Most definitely agreed. And so I want to use that to kind of transition into what I think we'll sort of close on, and we can go as long as you want on this, but, you know, talking about him being able to be more effective than any Libertarian Party candidate. I know y'all had talked a little bit about Hornberger and stuff on your show a couple weeks ago. So what was your opinion of the Libertarian Party's selection process for their presidential candidate, and then ultimately landing on Jorgensen and Spike Cohen? Did you get involved very much? What were your thoughts on all of that?
So I come out of the Mises Caucus camp as far as my affiliation with libertarianism, Libertarian Party, and the rest.
I do too.
So,
I try to promote the Mises Caucus as much as I can in the Peddling Fiction Facebook group, because I feel like it's a strong point for everybody in that group. Like, we all mostly lean in that direction, so I try to point everybody in that direction as much as I can.
yeah, and I think you said it best on one of your episodes, is that the Mises Caucus is libertarians for libertarians. I mean, it's cut and dry. It ain't that complicated. And so obviously my support was behind Jacob, and I had watched a handful of his speeches and heard people that I respect, give their take on him. And I was putting my support behind him because I didn't see the most important issues he was good on. The only one I think that he had that I'm still questionable on. I don't know if I'm a real libertarian, depending on my take on this, but he is open borders, and I'm not. But that's a debate for another day. To me, if you align with me more than 70%, you're likely going to get my support. And if you align with me 95%, you're for sure going to get my vote. So Hornberger was very much in that camp. And then all of a sudden, when their decision came out, and all of a sudden it was Joe Jorgensen, I was like, who the fuck is that? I don't even know who that is. And we're talking the Libertarian Party. There's a lot of I don't know who the fuck that is. And she was one of them. And so I said, well, okay, the Mises Caucus is new. They haven't been around that long. They don't have the full pull to, I guess, get it done yet. That's fine. I'll be along for the ride regardless. And so I was like, well, let's give her a shot. I can't be against her if the Libertarian Party voted her, nominated her. Let's see where she takes this. And, so immediately I started trying to find things, any information, speeches, conferences, online persona. Okay, who is this person before I start going full bore? And I paid more attention to Spike in the beginning. He seemed to be more vocal. His social media, he was on every damn podcast that I listened to before Joe, probably because he was more available because of the, not being the presidential candidate. And at first I was like, fuck yeah, this guy gets it. He's going to be able to carry the message and sell this idea, which it's ridiculous. It requires any level of salesmanship. But I was like, hey, that's my boy. All right, I'm riding with these people. And they had me all the way up until, I guess, the infamous, it's not enough to be actively, or it's not enough to be actively not racist. You must actively be anti-racist or whatever tweet. And when they sided with, from what I feel is an extreme left position, because as libertarians, race doesn't mean shit to us. Are you against, I think Johnny Profita said it the best. He's like, are you against tyranny or not? Are you against the state or not? You get rid of the state, you get rid of the abuse of power. Black people are also helped by that. So BLM should be on our side before we should have to try to be on their side. I don't know if he said it that way. Maybe I filtered it differently, but
that's something I've been trying to say for a few weeks now, is like, because I grew up in a predominantly Black community and a predominantly poor Black community. It's a small river town in Southwest Kentucky, so there's really not a lot there. And the black people that I grew up with are not the black people that represent the Democratic Party, you know, and the black people that are very active in libertarianism are the people that represent those poor black communities in different parts of the world or different parts of the country that like people should be looking to and hearing what they have to say. And if they would pay attention to it, a lot of people would turn to libertarianism because it really is the best choice for them in that.
Yeah, and a big part of that, I'm glad you brought that up. While all this was going on, I was watching the reaction by Eric July, by Maj Touré, Larry Sharp, you know, prominent black figures in the Libertarian Party, and they were all saying, "Nah, this isn't the way." And Eric July, good God, he went off for
that was
weeks about, I'm not about this. I'm not asking for anybody's help or permission to be black, or, you know, I don't want white people to feel guilty for shit they never did. And he was like, so therefore I'm against all of this argument that's coming at us. And I everything that I heard Eric saying, I was like, that makes sense to me based on my life experiences where I grew up down here in the South. I mentioned this earlier, you know, Atlanta, it's like, we already went through this. We already got this figured out. I don't need to go through all this with everyone. It's almost like they're trying to figure out something that we've already lived with for 30 years plus. You know, my whole life, I grew up, my dad was a local county police officer, and my mom was a bank teller. We were lower middle class, and we lived amongst every other race of people, and we were all in the same class, and we all hung out. Nobody gave two shits about the color of your skin, and we all got along. We all lived in harmony. Our parents didn't hate each other. Like, there was no tension whatsoever. So to me, when all of this starts coming back up and you have white fragility and white privilege and all these things that now are being thrown at me, and I'm like, well, I don't know what you're expecting from me, but it all seems pretty ridiculous. I don't think that this is in any level an attempt at making things better. I think that this is more so just venting frustration about things that you've been told that everyone else believes, which they don't. And I think it's not an attempt at healing. It's an attempt at revenge for something that they perceive incorrectly. And you know, I know that's a sensitive topic, and that's why I don't care about race, because I understand it's something that no one can control. So why make it? Why put any value on it at all? You know, it's, you know, of course, I'm sorry that anybody gets mistreated based on the color of their skin. Of course, that's evil. Who doesn't know that? Why are we still having this conversation? That's where I'm at. You know, it's like, to me, if you want true equal treatment amongst the races, you do. Seems pretty simple. The second that you bring race into it, you're automatically separating people based on an immutable characteristic that no one can control. And so now you're putting value in something that cannot be increased or decreased. I can't up my whiteness. I can't decrease my whiteness. There's no value in it. I don't know why this is a determining factor into who I am.
If you buy UGG boots, that'll instantly take your whiteness up at least 7 points.
Oh yeah, no, I'm drinking a local Atlanta IPA, so I guess I'm twice as white right now. Tomorrow I'll be, you know, less white, I guess.
Well, so I did. Spike was you were talking about Spike and the messaging that he was coming out with, and I thought when Spike went on Dave Smith and more or less defended the infamous tweet, I didn't consider his defense of it all that pandering. Like, I guess from having worked on local level political campaigns and having really actively campaigned for George W. Bush in 2004, and kind of just being around politics as far as that kind of stuff goes. Like I understood the messaging that Spike, as the vice presidential candidate, needed to deliver to remain at least somewhat, on par with what the campaign wanted to do. Like, obviously, he can't just go on Joe or on Dave Smith's show and be like, "Oh yeah, that was an awful tweet, and like we never should have sent that. That was stupid." Like, obviously, he couldn't just go do that. So sure. I thought he presented himself well on part of the problem. And then I got to go see Spike with a buddy of mine in St. Louis, or just outside of St. Louis, and listen to him speak. And he was very engaging and a lot of fun. And like we got to actually like bump elbows with him and get pictures taken and stuff. And it was great. And his energy and everything was really good. And I did like Jorgensen's. If you read some of the things that she's written, she is very intelligent, but if you listen to her talk, she's not super engaging. And so that was kind of like, as much as I liked her as a person and as a libertarian, as a candidate, she was kind of soft. I voted for her. So like I was really hoping that the libertarians would get the 5% and like eke it out, get 5%, and at least be able to set something up for 2024 to really pick up some steam. But it kind of is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, and definitely don't take me wrong. I don't have anything against Spike or Joe. I think they're great people. I do think they are real libertarians. I know that seems to be a pretty popular thing these days, to have libertarians self-determine if another person is one. That's not where I'm at all. I just think that as far as a campaign, they made a strategic misstep. And I can understand. I mean, it's what's happening. You have to talk about it. You have to, you got to address it. You're not running away from it. It was just, I think just me as an individual, race is just something that I'm just so tired of. Because like I said, we do kind of live in harmony with, all the different races in Atlanta and all over Georgia, that we just, it's kind of like, it's kind of old school. It's like, back in the day, you didn't ask somebody who they were voting for. And it was kind of a sign of respect. Race, we all understand it's a thing. We just live with it. And so when they made, when they brought it up or I guess made it a point to bring it up, I was just like, I can't. I just can't. Just for me personally, I was just like, damn it. Like, you're such good libertarians. Just stick to libertarianism. You have a year where the government is telling its citizens they can't go to work and they can't leave their house. And you've got all of this overreach. And I didn't see them really hit on that. I was like, if there was ever a year for libertarianism, holy fucking shit. And as soon as you make it racial, you're automatically losing people that you're not going to win back over. So as a campaign, it was just a bad strategy. I still think they're fine people. Hopefully one of these days I'll get to meet Spike. I would love to have a chat with him. He seems like a very engaging, good dude.
Well, and especially with doing that, with, making it about race and bringing that up, especially when, as a party, we do have people like Eric July and Maj Toure. But I guess I think that kind of comes back to the Mises versus Prags within the infighting that the Libertarian Party kind of has to deal with, because Hornberger was the Mises Party's candidate and Jorgensen was not, and so Jorgensen didn't really have a large contingent. I know there were a few Mises folks that were within the campaign and doing stuff, but she didn't have a really large contingent. And so I think the Prague side of the party kind of pushed some of that messaging that ended up backfiring. And then of course they're not going to reach out to guys like Eric and Maj, because they don't parrot the Prague line. So if the Libertarian Party could get past the infighting and figure out a way to do like as much as I hate to say it, to do like the Democrats, where all of a sudden we decide, yep, this is our candidate, and everybody gets behind them and just like, fuck everything else, we're going to do this, it would be so much better. But we're too libertarian for those other not so libertarians.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why I think the Libertarian Party as a party will have a very tough time reaching its end goal, as long as that continues, just like how you said it, because there's it's it's almost like a nonstop purity test. You know, if you say something, if you react to something, and it's like, oh, that's like something a Keynesian would say. It's like, well, I'm sorry. I mean, let's have a discussion. Maybe correct me. I mean, maybe I didn't get to the end of all these books. Maybe you have already, and maybe you can help a brother out. Let's get to that goal. And but that's just not there, because we're so libertarian that we're so libertarian that fuck your libertarianism is basically where it is. And going back on what you said, if they reached out to the people who had the greatest reach within the Libertarian Party, you would be reaching out to the Tom Woods, the Dave Smiths, the Eric Julys, the Maj Tourés, not kicking Maj Touré out of the party the year before. How can you come out pro all this when you just kicked out one of your most prominent members for reasons still to this day unknown? So I think the first thing you got to do is you got to get a chairman, and I know that they made a change, but if I can go back in time, get a chairman that doesn't say, if we're running Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party, you must vote for him because he's on the Libertarian ticket, and maybe have principle over party. I think that's the problem, is the Libertarian Party puts the party above principle and puts the party above libertarianism. And that pisses off libertarians to no end, to where they will go vote for a Trump just to stick it to the libertarians.
Oh, in 2016, I voted for Darrell Castle as a write-in ballot or write-in candidate here in Indiana because he wasn't on the ballot. He was the Constitution Party candidate. Because I did not like Johnson Weld. Weld's a war hawk, and Johnson didn't actually seem to know what he was talking about as far as libertarianism went.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't vote for those guys. They don't actually represent what I believe is libertarianism. And then I didn't like Trump, and obviously Hillary was horrible and always will be. So all right, I'm writing in, and I guess I should have wrote in Harambe, but I just couldn't get on that boat.
Yeah. I totally feel you. If I was thinking better back in 2016, I would have probably wrote in Harambe. But the one thing that's without a doubt, the current political climate as it stands now, the Democrats will never be in any level of worrying about getting my support. There's not a single policy or position they carry that I will ever support. Hillary was probably the most evil, conniving candidate I've ever seen in my entire life. And there's not a single thing that the left or the Democrats stand for that I can even 10% stand behind. Not a single one. I haven't seen it. I've looked into it. Nope, don't like any of it. Don't want it. So they're automatically, like, if it was a vote between Trump and Joe Jorgensen, oh, what a better world we would live in. Because even if Trump still got elected, well, at least we're not expanding wars. And to me, I look at, I have to rank, okay, what's the most important? What's the most important thing? And to me, war is, if not number one, it's like 1.1. And who has the best chance at winning, and who has the best chance at actually impacting that. And so this last time, I got to be honest, I voted Trump, not because I support him, not because I own a MAGA hat. It was an FU to the system. It was an FU to the Libertarian Party in a way. And I don't know really in the long run if that's going to do any good or bad. My personal take after this election is, I don't know if libertarians running out there in the presidential race is really good for the party. Personally, I think more local elections are where libertarians need to win. And I think, in all honesty, in America, in the political arena, the focus should stop being so much on the president Like if nobody after these past 2 weeks thinks that the president is probably overemphasized and a little blown up as far as how important they are, I think this past 2 weeks have proven that we could all stand a little less of presidential importance, and where the not to be super trite, but where the political rubber meets the road is in your local elections. They're the ones that affect your local taxes. They're the ones that got to stand behind you in the grocery line. You know, you can actually get them and get in front of them, get their attention. You can make change that way if you actually start having more conversations like this and more podcasts out there where more people can hear the message of liberty. um I've always felt like the majority of people are more libertarian than any other party. They just don't know it yet. And if they start voting that way locally, and you start to get state representatives and city councilmen and county commissioners that are libertarian, the president won't matter at all. And we won't be sitting here, for we only got about a year and a half before we start getting all worked up over 2024, because that's just the level of importance we put on federal elections. So what I would like to see,
it's time to start getting worked up about 2022. I'm
yeah.
planning on, speaking of the local stuff, I'm planning on running for county commissioner here in 2022, and like
Hell yeah.
I've already filled out all my paperwork with the Indiana LP and been talking to the county and regional organizers for Indiana, or for my part of Indiana, and working on kind of getting the plan going forward. And so yeah, I mean, that's right here at home is where we have to start making the changes. And if we could get really good, like not necessarily appropriate candidates on the presidential platform, but loud, flamboyant, like going to actually deliver a message that's going to get people to turn their head and say, oh shit, what are they talking about? Like, I think that would really help the party grow. But I don't have any expectation that person would actually win a presidency. But if somebody was out there, like, instead of being like a Joe Jorgensen that's very soft spoken and not going to rock the boat, if they were out there really just like saying crazy shit and getting people's attention, that would definitely start turning people over to be like, hey, I might need to go look into this a little bit.
Yeah, and if they're not going to say crazy shit, I will. And so I'll do it on Ignore the Rant every week, and I'll say all the ridiculous shit so they don't have to. And not that I'm going to have the same reach that they will, but it's a slow process. We didn't get here overnight. We didn't get to this crazy fucked up system that has more bureaucrats than elections and or elected individuals overnight. And it's not going to take one election or two elections to even begin to chisel away at it. So it's a slow process that I think takes time. You got to you're swimming up the stream, and so you gotta win the little ones and start stacking those up. And like, look at the governor of who is it, North Dakota or
South Dakota?
South Dakota. And she's already looking like she's going to be on the ticket for 2024 the presidential race, if Trump doesn't decide to do an extra wheel of Adderall and say, let me get at it. And I think that somebody like that could win, because you don't have to be a libertarian to be for liberty. And that's the most important thing. Liberty over everything else. And I don't give a shit if you got a D or an R or a Green Party or a Libertarian. If we can get all Libertarian Party members voted in, hooray. That won't be a sad day in my world. I'll be happy as shit. I'll learn how to do a backflip, and I'll do about 45 of them out back. But I'm not holding my breath. Ron Paul ran as a Republican. Thomas Massey ran as a Republican. Justin Amash, after he got voted in as a Republican, then left the Republican Party to be a Libertarian. There's a model of success already in front of us. And to me, it's just principle over party. And if we can get more liberty-minded people, regardless of what party you're on, in office to make the difference, in which I hope you will have that opportunity. Hell, maybe I need to get in touch with my local DNC representative, see how I can get some votes up your way. But I think that's where it all starts. I truly do. I like I said, I made the blasphemous comment that I did vote Trump, but I did vote Libertarian down ticket. Everywhere there was a Libertarian down ticket, where in my local elections, like Shane Hazel, who's awesome. He's got a podcast called Radical with Shane Hazel. Solid on everything. And I hope that guys like him get some more prominence, and we can actually start making an impact and get rid of the establishment people that go in there. I know a lot of people like to rail against the two-party duopoly, and there's a lot of argument against that, but I say there's an argument also to be made that if that's the system, you got to play within what people know, and it's up to us as liberty-minded individuals to work within the rules that they've set and still go own their ass.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, I think we're going to wrap on that. Thank you for joining me. I had a lot of fun, and maybe we'll get to do it again one of these days.
I look forward to it, man. And thanks for having me on. And I hope anybody that's listening to this, if you're interested in hearing more of my ridiculous rants, check us out at Ignore the Rant. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but we're on Instagram at Ignore the Rant _podcast and on Parler at Ignore the Rant. And I would love to have you on sometime. If you ever want me back on here, maybe to clarify some of the crazy, stupid shit I just said, I'd be more than happy to. So, Justin, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, too. Have a good evening, Jim.
You too.
And on that, we're going to wrap. I will do another one of these. I've actually got another interview coming up with another one of the Fiction Peddlers. I think we're doing it tomorrow afternoon sometime. So I'll be working on getting this one out sometime tomorrow. And then on Friday, I'll probably get another one out. So if you're listening or watching, hope you have a good evening, and I'll catch you next time.